background. There is so much more I could have gone into with this. The musical stations, so you pull into any station. Each station has a slightly different tune, so you know when you wake up, as it departs the station, you've missed it. I didn't know. I'm just going into the basics. So how the Shinkansen came about, and essentially what it's doing now, and how it's led the way in high-speed rail since much earlier than I originally thought about. So if we go back to, let's see, the 1600s, we have Japan very much isolated itself. It doesn't want anybody around coming in and changing things. For about 250 years, they self-imposed isolation until about 1860s, where they decided they would open their borders, start letting people in. Immediately, a lot of people are coming in to say, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy this? We'll take that off you, we'll trade it somewhere else, essentially to make money. British people among them, yes.
The Americans, of course.
At the time, we have the emperor sitting in Kyoto, and and forgive my pronunciations, I'm bad enough at English as it is, the Tokugawa shogunate sitting in what is Edo. I'm going to keep referring to it as Tokyo from now on, but essentially sitting there, and they hold the power. All of the decisions that are being made is done by the shogun. They proposed, because the emperor is sitting over here in Kyoto, and they're in Tokyo, they proposed that they're going to build a railway line. And this was in 1866, bringing together two of the largest metropolitan areas in Japan, allowing people to be able to transfer between them. In the meantime, the British, and Dutch in particular, were giving demonstrations of locomotives, which they brought over in ship. So in 1868, and one of the famous ones that they showed by this Anglo-Scottish guy, they built the Iron Duke and demonstrated it on an 8-mile track. Impressed, but they turned around and said, well, actually, there's also the Americans, and they also want to build a line as well. And they proposed building it between Tokyo and Yokohama. Very short line, it's about 60, 70 kilometers. But at this point, we have the Meiji Restoration, and the emperor's like, nah, I don't want to live in Kyoto anymore. I want to go to Edo, and I'm going to rename it Tokyo, and I'm going to take control. Now I'm in charge, and we're not having anybody who is not Japanese building any railways in our country, in particular, the one from Tokyo to Kyoto. It's got to be Japanese built. So off you all go. We will see what you produce elsewhere, but bear in mind, we are building it. So they said, come in, show us how you do it. So had a number of people from various European countries, and the British, who funded a lot of this initially to try and make sure that they could get first dibs and everything. So they brought in civil engineers, general managers, because don't we all love a general manager? They take out the money, but don't give anything. Locomotive builders, and surprisingly, they remembered to put people who drive them too. One thing to build it, another thing to say, right, off you go, and nobody knows how to actually drive it. So they started with a short one. The Americans got booted out, and they started with a short trip from Tokyo to Yokohama with their railway, and the purpose of this was to educate the Japanese workers on how to actually build things, so they could then take it, that knowledge, and then start building the rest of the railway across the country. So this trip started in 1872. So you remember, they were first demonstrating this in 1868, so in less than 4 years, they built a short trip, 49 kilometers, that took the steam train 53 minutes to get from Tokyo to Yokohama. There was a number of other small projects that were going on. So they were building small railways like coal mines, such to be able to bring goods and things needed to build the rest of the railway to more general areas to allow them to build it. If we compare that trip in 1960s and 1970s using just modern trains, not Shinkansen, that would take about 40 minutes. So now we have network expansion. We have first trip here. It's been built in 1872, and then we start to see, obviously, the smaller metropolitan areas that are near each other being connected. Going to Osaka, 1874, a couple of years later. 1877, go to Kyoto, slightly longer line. Kyoto to Otsu, 1880. Oh, we're all focusing over here, guys. The emperor's over here. And we're still building. Now, this is an important one because this was bringing in a lot of the goods and building materials from the Sea of Japan into the port, and then that was bringing it into Kyoto, Kobe, and Osaka, places where they were building their railways. So bringing a lot of materials in. But still, they haven't built or even started to repropose the main one that they originally proposed, connecting Tokyo to Kyoto. So that was then reproposed by Nippon Railway Company, and they were going to build it to Kyoto, but took a slightly different route. They went up to Takasaki first and built a second parallel line going up to Nagasaki. That's the one. And they were proposing going from the top of here all the way down, which seems a bit weird because, well, there's a straight line there. Aren't we supposed to build the quickest railways possible, not the ones that take massive seeding routes? Ever been on the ones from Edinburgh all the way up to the top of Scotland? It goes all the way around the coast and takes considerably longer than you expect for the short distance it actually travels. All the way up until you arrive at Aberdeen, where the sky is grey, the buildings are grey, the roads are grey.
People are grey as well.
But the problem is, constructing through mountains here, this costs a lot of money to be able to construct a direct link through the mountains, going this way, and going through the proposed Nippon Railway routes that they considered. So in the end, they decided that they would go down the Tokaido Road, following that path, which was approved in 1886. Yes, 238 kilometres longer than it needed to be compared to the straight route that you could take through the mountains, but it was 13% cheaper to build. Also meant it could be completed a lot quicker. And this was completed in 3 years. Incredibly quick. And that is what now becomes the Tokaido Shinkansen, which I will talk about specifically later. So here we have the birth of the Shinkansen, typical one that we see as the iconic bullet train, which, if you go back to the early proposals of it, which were actually done in the 1930s, I thought when I started researching this that actually it was a 1950s thing. No, they were starting to purchase the land back in the 1930s for this idea. And the project was actually called Dangan Risha, which actually literally translates to bullet train. And that's where we get the Englishized version of that's the bullet train, because that's what the code name was. The thing with the high speed is it needs to have preparation and the right infrastructure. Japan's existing infrastructure is a narrow gauge. This is 1,067 millimeters, not meters that I put there. That is an incredibly wide train. But it's not adapted for high speed. It can't take the pounding of the high speeds, and the small gauge means it's more difficult to be able to take corners. So they've gone for a much wider gauge. So the standard gauge here, so they went for 1,465 millimeters, I think it's on the next slide. A wider gauge gives better stability, but it also means it has to be straight, because the wider the gauge is, the longer the turning loop is. Look, if you look at London taxis, they're specifically designed to go down streets. They're not going down to the motorway at 200 miles an hour. They're designed for twisty streets. So they turn very quickly, but they're not built for speed. These are built for speed. You can't turn quickly. The other problem is, it's also going to cost more. The wide gauge uses more materials. So in order to make sure that they have a dedicated line for high speed, they decided to build the Shinkansen, which is literally translated to new main line or new trunk line, which is a dedicated infrastructure for these trains. No other train goes on it. So they started purchasing the land, and then the war happened. oh dear, things have happened, we will not go into detail, but essentially it put a crimp on what they were going to do in terms of building trades, because the materials were kind of needed elsewhere. So after the war, they've been demilitarized, they've been occupied, they've been had a lot of their ability to manufacture destroyed. So it's taken several years, but the new president, so Shinji Shogo, in 1955, who's the fourth president of the railways, proposes that they are going to rebuild the idea of the Shinkansen. We want to bring back the bullet train. Something that the nation can get behind. We can become front runners in this and set an incredibly ambitious target of 5.5 years for designing and building everything that nobody's ever built before. Nothing like ambition. Initial costs. As ever, with all costs of things, it doesn't tend to go down. 170 billion yen, which was $1.2 billion back then, which is 14 billion today, and it actually ended up costing 380 billion, which is 2.5 billion US dollars today, which is 30 billion today. I mean, you can't get a V2 bomb for that, so perhaps it was a bargain. But here's the HS2 comparison. They only doubled. We have more than doubled. To be fair,
They were spending millions and millions
They got a
of
railway
pounds
out
on
of it.
environmental study to protect a rare newt in that corner.
Or the battle,
Or back time.
which cost 100 million.
Yeah.
So,
In fact, the original plan was batshit crazy.
but yeah, a lot of that was basically due to the time taken, costs of people buying the land, because of course, if you're on a Shinkansen railway line that's going to be built, you're going to go, I want more money, because they're not going to go around you. They want to keep wanting to go straight through. And then materials costs. A lot of other countries are rebuilding. Materials are going to cost a lot more. They didn't have all of that money, so 31 times they went to the World Bank begging for money between 1953 and 1966, and they gave them about a third of it. So the 2/3 would come from Japan itself. Huge financial overruns. Sogo's forced to resign, which just proved that if you are called Shinji, nothing good happens. But if we're looking at it today to build a kilometre of Shinkansen railway, because it uses very specific design to be able to take the wear and tear and speed, it's approximately $210 million per kilometre. And that includes stuff like the tunnelling, seismic stuff I'll go into later, and the increasing land costs, because Japan is quite small and compact with a lot of its big metropolitan areas very tightly regulated in terms of things like sound, which we'll also go to. But here we go, we've eventually made it. It's a few years late, 3.5, which is not too bad. At least they've got it. We're still waiting for ours. A consortium of 6 manufacturers, some of which you'll be familiar with, Hitachi, Kawasaki, a number of dedicated specialist train companies producing these components to bring together to produce the Series 1, the classic bullet train-shaped Shinkansen. October 1st, 1964, we see the inaugural journey. One leaves Tokyo and one leaves Osaka at the same time, in the hope that they both get to the other end at the same time. This is 9 days before the Summer Olympics in Japan, so a big deal. If we take that distance, so Tokyo to Osaka, by normal steam train it takes 16 to 20 hours to be able to do that trip. By conventional electric train, which I told you about before, from Tokyo to Yokohama, that would take 9 hours. Series 0 takes 4 hours, a considerable saving of time. If we compare it to today's, though, 2.5 hours by the Nozomi, and it's 1.5 hours physically by plane, but that's not taken into account the time taken to check in and check out and get through the airport. So actually, you could get to Osaka quicker by getting on the Nozomi than you could going to the airport. The whole point of this was high speed, reliable, and it's also environmentally friendly. It's also
the other way around.
Oh, I've got jokes about that later. However, we're going incredibly fast on what is essentially two thin pieces of metal. So we've got the standard gauge, 1,435 millimeters, so it does help stability. The wider gauge allows the resistance to the train tipping over, which comes onto another point later on. But it can go incredibly fast, 200 plus kilometers an hour. Some of the trains today are going even faster. Higher speed means we have to have larger wheels. The larger wheels are needed because we need a standard gauge. Smaller wheels, the faster they go, the more centrifugal force you get, the more chance you have of ripping stuff apart. So the wider wheels reduce the amount of centrifugal force. So you've got less stress on both the rails and the wheels themselves. And load distribution is very narrow. Then there's going to be a lot of weight, particularly as we started to see in the 80s and 90s, double-decker trains coming in. So we can reduce this. So it reduces weakness on the track, stress on the track, and allows us to be able to have some incredibly long carriage trains that they use. The problem we have is Huntington oscillations. And this is essentially what happens. This is the front view, and this is the above view. The faster you go, you start to get less mechanical adhesion, and you start to have a lot of vibration. And that vibration increases exponentially as the speed increases. So it starts to throw itself off the track. The clever engineers managed to get around that. Less conical wheels. So essentially when you have a train, the wheels are conical, so the inner part of the wheel is inside the track so it doesn't tip off. So when it does turn corners, and you often hear it when you go to London, the screeching sound of the trains going around London, yeah, that's essentially what's keeping it on the track. But if we reduce the conical nature of the wheel, it reduces the oscillation. And then they introduced air suspension within the trains, which is designed to be able to do exactly the opposite of what it gets feed in. So very much like, if it's vibrating one way, it then changes the suspension to be able to reduce that vibration. And what you get is an incredibly smooth ride. I've been on a Shinkansen, going an incredibly huge rate of knots, and able to just stand up and just wander around without going all over the place. It's so smooth. But of course, we can't always follow the coastline where there's already a path been built. We want to expand it. But Japan is full of hills. So it requires a lot of tunnelling. And here's one of the ones on the Sanyo line. Here, you can see these tiny, tiny little tunnels. So what they actually did, so here's the Japanese Shinkansen tunnels, and here is the French TGV versions, 30% less surface area, which reduces the amount of cost. So you've got trains very close together, and you've got really no access points. It does mean it reduces it because they've got a lot of tunnelling to do. However, this introduces yet another problem. Particularly in built-up areas, the government since 1985 imposed a decibel limit going through populated areas. It's 75 decibels. Going through tunnels, the trains actually create a sonic boom at 90 decibels. So what do? We could go slower, but that kind of defeats the object of actually creating a high-speed train. So this is where we see biomimicry coming in. So the train enters the tunnel, the air is compressed and goes down here. We have a compression wave that comes all the way down the tunnel, right in front of the train. The faster it goes in, the more it's compressed through that tunnel until it comes to the end, and we have a sonic boom coming out at the end, often referred to as a tunnel boom, because the air is releasing at 343 meters per second, which allows us to go beyond the speed of sound. It's above 90 decibels. So here we have Nakatsu, the amazing designer, who actually did a lot of bird watching, and observed that kingfishers were capable of diving into water to catch fish without creating any splash or rippling effect, all based on the evolution of their beak. So as a result, he started to design trains based on that similar concept, and found that it actually reduced the hydrodynamic drag in Kingfishers, so reduced the aero drag within trains. And that redesign meant that going through the tunnels reduced the tunnel booms from 90 to 70 decibels, so it's now below what's required in urban areas. It reduced the drag coefficient, so less wind resistance compared to older designs, reducing it from 0.25 to 0.16. For those of you who are technically minded, that's actually quite a big reduction, which means it's also using less electricity, which is great. So if you keep using the same electricity, you can go faster. So it's a win-win-win. Just keep going faster. But we also have another problem. They have earthquakes. We have tremors. We don't see a lot of them. But they found ways of getting around that. So here we have a number of monitors. They've got about 1,500 monitors placed across the entire network. Before 1992, they used to detect the S waves, and this is the S wave pattern here. So we have seismometer picking up a small tremor, and then we go into the S waves where we start to see the actual detection of an earthquake. The problem is, by the time you detect it, everybody else is detecting it too because they can feel it. It doesn't really make much of a difference because you might as well just stop the train straight away. Post 92, they came up with this your EDEAS system, the Urgent Earthquake Detection and Alarm System. It detects P waves, not the ones that are in the urinals, but the ones that are in the earth. And these are the very tiny little tremors that you start to see before the main tremors that are associated with an earthquake. The system tries to estimate that intensity based on historical data and trying to predict what's been there. It's never going to be perfect. It then determines what the risk is in a particular area and the risk to those trains that are travelling through, because it knows where they all are. And if it is above a cut-off, then it sends a signal to the trains to stop. So here the monitors, that cut-off is triggered, and it sends it straight to the transmitter, and the transmitter cuts it, and the trains receive no power, they start to break. From P-wave detection to transmission to the transmitter stop it was 3 seconds. The updates post-2004, where they now include a number of other variables, and this is now monitoring 200 data points a second to try and work out, because they were getting false positives for this, they'd stop it and then an earthquake was not happening, but better to be safe than sorry. They've reduced that now from P-wave detection to transmission to stopping the train within 2 seconds. That doesn't mean that they are still not affected. So here we have a derailment in 2004 from a magnitude 6.8 earthquake, travelling between Urasa and Nagaot. I really hate that sometimes. Or should I say, I really hate myself for not being able to pronounce them quickly enough. Travelling at 200 kilometres an hour. It gets derailed. This is on a raised section. So this is in a built-up area, a raised section with people underneath it. It didn't go out the raised section, it just derailed, no fatalities. 2011, magnitude 9 earthquake. The EDEAS system stopped 33 Shinkansen trains that were travelling over 300 kilometres an hour, and only one of them derailed. So it managed to stop them within 2 seconds. Well, managed to tell them to stop within 2 seconds. Trying to stop something within 2 seconds at 300 kilometres an hour is a bit difficult. But it's slowing them down. It was one derailment, and again, no fatalities. So what is it like today? This is the Tokaido Shinkansen. It goes from Tokyo to Osaka. It's 515.4 kilometres. Very important, that 0.4. It's the busiest train line in the world. By far the busiest. If you were to look at the busiest stations in the world, I think Japan holds 7 of them. Huge number of people go through here.
Shinjuku station's insane.
Yes.
And what's the queuing system for?
12 trains per hour go on this track. So that's 372 Shinkansen per day, and that's 432,000 passengers travelling daily on just the Shinkansen for this one track. Each track has its different types of trains. You can go into each track and look at every one of them. I'm just going to focus on the Tokaido one. You've got the Nozomi here, which stands for either wish or hope, depending on how it's translated. 16-car train. A lot of people carry here. We have non-reserved carriages, so you basically have to have a reservation if you want to travel on this. It takes 2.5 hours to do the trip because it's not stopping every time, it's only stopping 3 times. So in major hubs, it is designed to get people from Tokyo to Osaka as quickly as possible. There are 4 of those running an hour. And they leave on time and arrive on time. The Hikari, which translates to light. Again, another 16 carriages. That stops 13 times. There's a few more stops compared to the Nozomi. There are 3 hours, so it's only an extra half an hour for all those 10 extra stops. There's 1 an hour. Because if you really want to get there quicker, you might as well take Nozomi. Then there's a Kodama, or what's called Echo. Again, another 16 carriage train, a lot more unreserved. This is generally used for commuting, which is really weird. Fastest trains in the world are used for commuting. When we went to Japan, we essentially did the same. We stayed in place and went, right, that's about 300 kilometers away. I was only going to take 50 minutes. Okay, let's go. And come back. It was amazingly quick. 16 stops. It stops every stop, 4 hours. And there's 2 of those. And then you've got the various carriages. So the unreserved, the reserved, which are not blacked out, and then the green colours. Here's all the other lines. So there was the Tokyo to Osaka one that I was talking about, but here there's a whole load of others. So the Tokaido one I've just been talking about, built in 1964, 285 kilometers an hour is the fastest they can go on that. Sanyo one, built 11 years later, 300 kilometers. Then we keep going down, 1982, 320 kilometers. The Kaido one, 2016, one of the newer ones, 260 kilometers. There's a bit of a reason why. So in the snowy bit up here, specialist trains for that. 82, 270 kilometers. 1997, 260 kilometers. The Kyushu line, another 2004, 260 kilometers. And then the latest one here, which is all on its own, it's not connected to anybody yet. 260 kilometers. It takes about 30 minutes to travel with that. It's tiny. And then you get different types of trains and service. A lot of them will have the ordinary class, the standard trains that we probably don't see here because they're nice. The green car ones, which are generally the upper class, first class, what we'd see on the train. So rather than having the 3x2, you have the 2x2. And then the grand class, which is not for carrying your gran, it's what is considered first class on a plane. And these are predominantly on these 4 lines here. And what we see is some of the big lines, like the Tokaido one, often having 16 carriages. Others, like the Sanyo line, will have, there's the Sanyo line, there it is, will have between 8 and 10 carriages. And some of the smaller ones, depending on how many people are on it, only having 6. I still remember this train's pulling into the neighbouring village that I used to live in. They had 2. And they were basically the cut-off bus chassis onto a repurposed bed that they got from transporting cargo, and they just put the bus chassis on top of it. And they're getting, even over here, they're getting luxury Shinkansen. It's not fair.
Therefore, I go away from the pieces there. The piece of reference.
So, the ones you won't see, but the ones that started it all, I'm not going to, there are so many different ones. It's like they came in, it's like, I want to tweak it, I want to tweak it, I want to tweak it. There's so many. The Shinkansen Zero series, 220 kilometers an hour, which back then, when you consider it's the 1960s, was pretty good because they kept it in operation all the way till 2008. Wow, what a way to start. Possibly. I went to see the original one when I was out there. And then Japan did something that they really love to do. They take nomenclature and throw it out the window. I used to buy Sony phones. Why is your Y better than your Z? So they started the 200 series. Again, it's not going any faster, it's staying the service a little bit longer, and then they brought out the 100 series. We're going backwards. Okay, they changed it. They wanted to go slightly more pointed. They want more of a point on their bullets rather than a rounded end. And then they went to the 300 series. What's going on here? So what's next? But this is slightly faster. So the first three are the same speed. This is slightly faster. We're going more wedge shape now rather than classic round frontage. We're having more wedge shape thinking, being trying to get the air over the top of the train, and that allows some sort of downforce, trying to keep it on the track. The ones that you might see in operation, there are about 30 of these in operation in different variations, but essentially you've got the really wedgy ones, which are currently doing 300 kilometers an hour, introduced in 1997. That's the 500 series. The E2 series, 275 kilometers, again introduced in 1997. It's like, guys, just build one of them. The double-decker, because the demand was so great that they were able to have, because it's a dedicated line, they've got nothing to get around in terms of, they've already built the bridges to accommodate things like this. So we've got a double-decker. That wider gauge allows for a heavier train. We're going to have considerably more people on this. It's going to increase the weight of the train. Introduced in 1997, double-deckers going at 240 kilometers an hour. And then the classic that most people see when they go over there, the N series or variants of the N series S, which traditionally do about 300 miles an hour, introduced in 2007. And then the specialist ones. So these are the ones that go up into the north, particularly designed to be able to withstand the snow and cold weather. So they've got better protective electronics and stronger nose coats in case they come across snowdrifts. But still doing 320 miles an hour, that snowdrift is not going to stand a chance. But we're going incredibly fast and still incredibly safely. Operated for 51 years. It's a bit more now. 10 billion passengers have gone on it since it opened, with 6.5 just on the Tokaido line alone. So that one line is taking over half the people who have travelled on it. And over its entire time, they've never had a single fatality at all. You compare that, so I just pulled up some statistics. So going back, so this is 2010 to 2019, we can still see the number of deaths in European countries on rail. So the bigger ones, 1998, German high-speed crash with 101 when it left the track, went straight into a bridge, killing 101 people. 2013 derailment in Spain killed 79. Oh, I wasn't going to put loads up, I just wanted to point out. They were the first to build high-speed rail. They've been running it the longest. They are going the fastest, and they have never had a fatality. That is an incredible record. And if you get a Japanese rail pass, you can go and travel on any of them, apart from the really expensive one. It has gone up in recent years, so a 7-day consecutive is 50,000 yen, which is £237 for just a 1-week pass. So if you are going, make sure you use it as much as possible. We essentially were doing that for a 7-day pass. If you want the upgraded one, it's 70,000 yen. 21 days goes all the way up to 100,000 yen for just the standard class. Looks like this. £473, £662 for the upgraded class. And you can ride a lot. All of the Shinkansen lines, all of the Japan rail lines. If there are Japan rail lines that you can't get to because another company owns it, you can travel on those as well to get to it, because I'm going over there to travel on that line to my right. You must take me. The ferry, the monorail, and any Japan rail bus service. You can pretty much get anywhere. But if you want to go on super duper Nozomi, you must pay an extra £23 to £50 depending on the distance you're going, on top of this. Doesn't matter how much you paid, it's special.
I mean, if you go around the country a lot, it's not that high price.
Like I said, last time we went, we were using it as a taxi service. We would stay in one place, that's the day trip, 2 hours out, 2 hours come back. So where are we in terms of high-speed rail in Japan compared to other countries? Well, Japan has obviously seen that a lot of places are trying to catch up because, I do love this in Indonesia, they called it whoosh. Well, it does what it says on the tin. TGV goes exactly the same. I'm guessing it's because it's alphabetical, they've put Japan below France, but essentially everybody's doing about 300 to 320 kilometres an hour.
If the German wants to.
Unless you're on the newer ones, so China and Indonesia will have very modern stuff now. And then Shanghai, if you're looking at the maglev, and Japan's going, wait, we're doing that too. I know how much it's costing a lot of money, but 603 kilometres an hour. While in the UK,
We invented the second railway and we're like,
Yeah, well, we've got Hitachi trains now. Have to be a bus.
yes, well, they're on dedicated
It's much more
lines as well.
comfortable.
The Hitachi trains work when they're on the HS1 line.
Very,
So
very well, sir.
where's it going with Shinkansen? Well, we've got the Hokkaido line is being extended all the way up to Sapporo. Great, I do like the beer. I'll be able to travel to that next time. They reckon that's going to be finished about the late 2030s. Where are we? Down here, the Hokuriku, that line, going from that place to Kyoto and then on, is going to be done by the late 2040s. They just keep going. And then they've got the Shinkansen, which is going to go directly towards Nagoya. Straight this time, we're not going to take the alternative routes. That currently takes 4 hours to drive. The current Shinkansen takes 1.5 hours to do that trip. They think they're going to be able to do it in 40 minutes, and that's at its reduced speed of 500 kilometres an hour. And they've done test tracks where it's currently doing 603. Obviously this is not working. It's so fast actually, you can see it go past. No. Fine. It's gone. Yeah, it's not coming back. But essentially you see it go through and you barely see it. It's going that fast. Obviously this is going to cost a huge amount, but they think it's a good investment. They have a lot less flying. People actually see it as a privilege to be able to go on this and we're willing to pay for it. And we just go, wow, it's here on time. It's not on time. It's so smooth. It's not us. So those are my sources, and I'll just leave you with the special that actually does exist.
We've been there.
Of course there would be.
Thank you very much.